Okay, so as you can see, we've got basically everything coming together now. I've put on the wire cutters that go underneath. Basically, they're not painted. We're going to hand paint them afterwards to touch them in. All the grab handles are on and the various bits and pieces, so that's all like the delicate bits. So the only bits really we need to fit on this now is obviously still the lights. We'll do that obviously very last. The rotor system, the rotor head and the weapons. But apart from that, we're basically all together. Now, carrying on with our weathering, this is where, you know, this is me doing it my way. There's lots of different ways. You can go out now and buy pigments. Now, pigments are basically clay, if you like, pastels, been ground up very, very finely, and then you can buy them in pots and do it. Obviously, MIG spring to mind, War Pigs are another company and things like that. And you can go out and buy various sets. Now the difference really between one of these pigment sets, so to speak, and obviously just a pastel from any art shop is that they grind them down to like a talcum powder. They're very, very fine, and obviously they get in very, very well. But if you're just going to be doing sort of weathering like we're going to do here, you don't really need it. So all I do is actually you grab your pastel like this. This is a Daler Rowney sort of sandy colour type thing, so I wanted a dusty colour. I've got my sanding stick, and literally just going to give it a bit of a rub, just like that. Now the beauty of this is, one is it's pretty much mess free because you just give it a rub and away you go. And then you can pick it up with a cotton bud, just like this, and have it on your bud, and then start obviously working it around your model exactly how you want it. And you can give it a nice sort of dusty look. Now if you was to use the pigments, obviously you can pick them up again just the same way and do it. Now I'm not dissing, you know, the companies who make these pigments. It's personally, I just don't use them, you know, and I'm sure they probably don't use my wash in a lot of ways, but you know, it's just personal choice that obviously you can go out and buy pigment sets and they do lovely colours, but if you go and get yourself a set like Daler Rowney, I've got here these art pastels, you know, you can mix up your colours, you can add a bit of brown to it. So if I just grab a brown, this is my nice set that I've got here, and obviously in here, as you say, I've got lots of different colours. I've got through to reds and browns and various bits and pieces. So if you wanted to, on your little palette, on your sanding stick if you like, you can put next to it some brown, just like so, okay, and then just take your cotton bud and sort of blend them together to make a colour in the middle, something like that, and then that way you can just pick that up onto your cotton bud and just literally brush it on where you want it. Now, because it's a pastel, it's going to work somewhat just like our clay does, our clay wash. So if we just brush it around everywhere, and then a bit too much, all you do is give it a bit of a brush, and you can work it in to make various effects. So if I just bring you in here, and you get this sort of dusty effect going on at the back. So if we just pick up some more, we'll just put on top of these engines and various bits, and obviously where you would get crew and dust in the desert, you can make, you know, very nice effects, and it's just one of those things that you can keep building up. Now you could do exactly the same with the wash. I know I've spoken about it before. It says I can't find any. There we go, and I have the wash dried out in the colour cup and use that. Now the difference basically being is, this being a pastel, it might not come off. I'm not going to make any guarantees. These are just ones I've had literally for years floating around, these pastels here, so there's no guarantees that if it went wrong you could get it off. If you're going to use the wash, and obviously you could use the brown with the dark, if you let it dry out in the colour cup like this, and then you can just rub it off the bottom and put it on, if it goes horrendously wrong you can just wash it off and start again. But because we're only going to be doing really a light bit of weathering, if you like, with the pastels, we don't really have to worry about it. So all we're going to do, as I say, is pick up all this dust, and we're just going to give it a gentle dust over areas where it's going to get it. And obviously because this is raised panel lines, again, it's one of those nice things because it's going to stick to those panel lines that are sticking up, and you know, it'll work with us in a lot of ways. So all we're going to do is literally just giving this a little rub around everywhere, and I hope you can, it's picking it out doing this, but by mixing that brown with the light, we're getting, you know, actually quite a nice effect that I'm liking, because it's giving that sort of dust effect. So we're just going to pop around everywhere, and obviously don't forget to do your wheels and your bits and pieces. Now just at any point you can just grab your bit of kitchen towel Okay, now as I said, I'm not going to make any guarantees this will come off because it is a pastel and it is a pigment, and obviously depending on how it is, but literally if you just give it a rub, you should find it comes off on your thing. So if you've overcooked it a little bit and it's a little bit too strong, just pop round and take it off. But it's a great way, and you can literally, if you play with it and do it a bit at a time, don't go, you know, running into sort of heavy, because you don't want to overdo it, and the pastels do build up very, very quickly. Make no mistake about it. You might think, oh, it's not really happening, and before you know it, you've got lots and lots and lots of things going on. But there we go. If you can, I've done this area whilst we've been chatting, and as you say, you get quite a nice sort of grimy, I know it's a bit difficult with the glare on there, but you get that sort of dirty look. Now obviously, you know, this is looking more mud, like a red mud colour, if I'm honest. So all we'll do, we'll take some more of this light colour. I'll just put some more in a stick out of shot there. And we're just picking up some, and we're just going to dab it all over, literally like this. And then all we'll do, we'll work that in by physically rubbing it all in, just to take out the big marks, and it will give us that nice dusty look. And obviously think about what we're doing as well. You know, we're going to be doing the areas for these access points, you know, crews climbing up, checking hatches, various things. So that's going to pick up sort of, you know, more sort of perhaps mud dust than, you know, your normal type thing. But certainly if you're doing armour, it's something I did plan on doing to the Abrams during the Abrams build, if you remember when I did that one. But the trouble with it was I was trying to be a bit authentic to the crews, and speaking to the tank crews, I would have got shot because, as I said, their commander made them clean the tanks all the time. So obviously I had to stick with their wishes of how it all goes. But you can see how quite simple it is to get that effect, and if it's going a little bit too strong or a bit wrong or anything like that at any point, you can literally do it. Now it's one of those things, it's quite hard to see with the lights and the various bits and pieces. All those things you have to sort of take my word for it. It's a shame you can't see it in the flesh, because with pastels it's very, very hard to see it on camera. I'm looking at it and to me that's perfect. Obviously looking at it at the camera here, it doesn't look like much has gone on. You can see a little bit of redness, but certainly dustiness isn't being picked up because we're under fluorescent lights and ultraviolet lights and things like that. But if you compare it to the other side, we haven't done that side there, and that side is done. So it just tones it all down. Now the thing with the pastels is when we come to finish it off, all we're going to do is our flat coat with our extra acrylics. We're just going to go right the way over it, a nice dusty coat from quite far away. We don't want to be in there, because if we saturate the pastel itself, it will darken up and it will disappear. So you want to do it from about a foot away, 30 psi, 35 psi, quite a dry mix, just a couple of drops of thinners into it, and just dust it over from long range. And then if you're not going to hand lathe it, it's going to sit in your display cabinet. You can literally just pop around with some powder, with the actual chalk dust, and just give it a bit of a dust all over, just to make it, you know, give it that sort of dusty, worn look. Okay, so as you can see, we've got the weapons fit on there. Still needs a bit of weathering around those areas, which we'll take care of in a moment. Tail rotor's on as well, so obviously we're now looking the business and we're looking like an Apache. The weathering's gone very well. I did a little bit more to it. I'm still going to carry on and do even more. Now, we obviously put those handles and bits and pieces on, which obviously we haven't put on before, and the wire cutters and things like that, so they're going to need painting. So it's just as easy to whip around them afterwards with this. And here I've got a little bit of olive drab, which is AH-64A in Tamiya. Tamiya is quite nice for hand brushing like this. So we just get a bit on the brush, and we're just going to touch in any little bits and pieces. Now don't worry about it not being a good colour match and things like that, because we're going to whip around it with some pastel as well. So we're just popping around, got a hair on the end there. Yeah, we're just going to pop round and paint up those areas. Now in some ways, when you're doing aerials and things, they do get bits of paint and are looked after, because they're the areas that tend to wear out quite a bit. But obviously we'll be able to blend that in. So we're just going to pop round and do those areas around here. Little bits down under here to do. And we've got the step. So just have a good look round, make sure you've got all your bits and pieces, your handles and all those things done. And when you're happy with it like that, and then you can move on. Now, chipping. Obviously, you could basically come along with a bit of silver, aluminium, something like that, and chip away to your heart's content all over it. The trouble with it is it's a little bit too strong. What I tend to do is use a grey. Now, the reason I use a grey, and quite a dark grey at that, and for this we'll use a bit of Tamiya AH-64. Find it all. There you go, that's a good one. AH-63. Any grey will do as long as it's a dark grey. So this is sort of the German grey. So what you do, there again, you get your paint. Okay, now you want quite a small, thinnish brush, something like this. You obviously, if you have got a very, very thin one with a long point, you have to be a little bit more precise with it. So if I show you what I mean, and all we're going to do, it's very, very simple. With all chipping work and things like that, you've got to make it as straightforward as you possibly can. Now, I've got to try and show you this the best way without with it in. So we do take a tiny bit, and the way I do this is I call it working in triangles. Okay, so you just paint a little triangle on and backfill, just like that. Okay, now it's going to be quite hard for you to see this. I just sort of pick out some areas, okay, and you just do little triangles with the grey. Now, I know that's very tricky for you to see, and it'd be better when it dries, because at the moment you've got that wet look, but it gives that effect of like the top coat's been knocked off and you've got paint underneath, or even it could be metal underneath, because obviously the metal will be dark if it's not reflecting on the sunlight, and it does things like that. So that's all we're doing on here, and we're going to do this quite sparingly, and we're just going to pop around and pick out little areas, and we're just doing little corners, things where you've got a panel line. Follow the panel line down one side and then split to one side of it. But if you use the point of the brush and you literally just do little triangle type shapes and then overlap the triangles, and you can build them up and work with it like that. Now obviously it's quite hard to see some of this when you're doing it with the grey, but that is the point. We don't want it to be too stand-outy. We don't want it to, you know, obviously look too much. But if you do like sort of lightning type strikes with it, leading edges, bits and pieces, just like that. If I do a small one here on this bit here, okay, and we'll just have a little one here, okay, and it'll just give that effect of knocked off paint. And it's there again, it's one of those things, I know I talk about it, it's that little subtle thing that your eye can see but you're not focused on. It's not too much in your face. If you was to come along with an aluminium now, it would be so sharp and it would just stand out. Now this is where we vary. Obviously you can see pictures anywhere on the net or go to shows. This isn't against people who do it. Obviously this is just my personal taste. If you want to do it, you go for your life. But from my point of view, it always looks too strong and stands out. Now I know they look good. Don't get me wrong, you get them and they're fantastically heavily weathered and it looks great and it stands out and it's that real wow factor. Certainly I've seen a lot of Phantoms, you know, because you can have really heavy weather those and it's got this big wow factor, very impressive. Reality is they're never that bad, you know, unless they really have been through the mill and they're very old and completely kicked in. They are never that bad up close. So what I prefer to do is this more the subtle technique of perhaps having 3 shades of a grey to make up weathering, rather than having, you know, obviously silver lumps and chunks taken all out of it. There's a good, you know, I'll put the picture up in a moment. This, what you're about to see, is a BF 109. And it's all done exactly the same, grey paint, chipping underneath. You know, I think it works well. It's probably the heaviest bit of weathering I've done. It was more of a, you know, commission. The guy wanted it heavy weathered. I did it. He wanted more. It got more, and that was what he was happy with. Personally, I would have stopped a little bit earlier, but it looked great. But that's another classic example that where it is done with grey paint and actually not with any type of silver or anything like that. So there we go. I'll just carry on and just do a few more little bits all over this. Just remember when you're doing these not to stick your finger in it with various bits and pieces as you're going around, because you don't want to put a nice big grey fingerprint on as you go. So all we'll do, not too much on your brush, that's the other thing, make sure you don't overload your brush. Okay, and we're just going to pick out tiny little areas just to have a little nick and a chunk. And that's the other thing, if it is wrong, because it's not so, you know, bright and in your face, you're not going to notice it, so you can afford to go a little bit wrong and nobody's going to really, you know, see it and go completely mad that you've
got this huge thing there and bits and pieces like that. So that's the thing, when you're doing this type of thing, it is a worry because you are sticking grey paint over your nicely finished model and things like that. But at the end of the day, you know, enjoy what you do and let it flow. Don't, you know, this is my Bob Ross bit, but let it flow and enjoy it, and don't sit there sort of worrying about it too much. If you start to think about it too much, that's the bit where you'll start to make mistakes and it will go wrong and you'll go over the top because you'll be focusing too much on doing it. You know, I never plan this, I just literally start to go and that's it. You know, I sort of end up where I get, and there's no written plan, and I don't usually have an idea in my mind of how it's going to be.
But certainly, you know, coming back to our little book here, as you can see, we've got the picture of the Apache there, who's really been through the mill, very rough, but there's no massive silver weathering on there, there's no huge chips, it's still all roughly that same dark colour that we're trying to do here as well. Okay, so it's that fun moment of truth now. We're just unmasking. Obviously it's always a concern when you're doing helicopters that you don't get overspray on the inside. This one's not too bad because you can get in there. Push came to shove, you could get in there and get it out, and, you know, with a bit of thinners or a bit of polish on a cotton bud, and get in there. But say certainly if it's a rounded surface, they tend to be a bit more hard work. Probably some little areas to clean up in there, but we can do that with a cocktail stick and just scrape it out, being acrylic. So there we go, we'll just this front one off as well. Okay, big moment of truth is these side ones. Okay, there's one. And here comes two. So there we go, looking quite the business now, and we're certainly sort of turning into a nice Apache type looking. So what we're going to have to do is get the handles on, and we're still going to mask up just the inside of these doors. So we're going to do it quite basically, just this bottom half, we're just going to run some tape along the bottom here up, and we're going to spray that black. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the outside on for a moment. So we just take our grey tape. Now this doesn't have to be an exact science, this one, because you're not going to really see it, it's just I want it to look quite nice. So all we've done, we've put it in there like that. We're going to get your nail right in the end, pull it round, just like that, to give our curve. Okay, and then we'll just put a tiny bit more, just on that top edge. Okay, and that area there, we're just going to spray black with a little bit of flat black. We'll do the same on the other side. That way, it's just when the doors are open, it will look better. So we're not going to flaff about doing the complete edges, we're literally just doing the bottom half of the door. Okay, so we'll get that sprayed up. Okay, so as you can see here, we've now got the actual doors on. I used the tiniest amount of super glue, literally 2 little drops, and then use the gator glue. Put it in, and then I actually put a pot underneath, just like that, to hold them up in position in there. You have got some little handles that go up inside there as well to hold it all up. Obviously we've got the lights on now, everything else is there, and it's all together. The only thing I've just done is just sprayed the top little mast here that goes on top of the rotor head. Now this is where you'll have to make your decision. If you're doing the longbow type, obviously that has a big radome on the top, but this one I'm just doing as the normal version. So we've got our rotor head here, and this is literally going to just stick straight on the top, and then the entire assembly will then push down on like that, and away we go. So we're getting there. Really the last little things we're going to do, we're just going to have a good look around it, check everything, and then we've got some little pitots here which I put onto the actual top tips of the pylons. They've just got to be painted silver, and a few little bits of area I'm just going to pick out with bits of silver for obviously hydraulic spring rams, things like that, various bits and pieces. But there we go, we're basically getting there. Okay, and there we have it, completely all done. That's the Academy Apache, we're all finished. If I just take the rotor head off, it just saves it getting knocked and everything else. You see, disco light at the back, or disco ball as it's known. Literally on that, it makes for quite a good colour. It's X34, which is the metallic brown that Tamiya do. Works quite well on there. It gives it that nice wet look, and if you give it a couple of coats of like a Johnson's clear afterwards, or just a clear gloss coat, it really brings it to life. A few things to mention on there, obviously being careful when you join the main access hatch doors onto the actual helicopter itself. If you can use super glue, because of fogging I did have a little bit of it, but there again, if you use a cocktail stick on the wooden so it won't scratch, and just scrape it all away, and then if you've got any concerns over it, if you get a little bit of future on your brush and just brush it on there, it'll take care of it. Basically, kit went together very, very well. There's no problems with it anywhere. The only trouble is, obviously, we said, is getting these rubber tyres on over the top, but we cut them off and we got in there okay. Clear parts all added, all the little silver bits. The gun, as I said, it was going to get a wash. It did. Just had a sort of, gives it that oily, greasy look that they tend to get. Underside got a little bit more weathering than the top, so that sort of took care of that as well. As I say, we did working with pastels on this one, which we don't usually do in a big way, but on this one, because you know it's not a commission, it's one off for myself, so then I can basically have a play with it, and that's what we did. With the pastels, as I say, it's one of those things, it really does depend on how far you want to go. If you want to carry on doing it and adding it and building up the layers, you will find that the more you add, the better it looks. Your only trouble is, obviously, be careful when you're handling it, especially greasy fingers, things like that, because otherwise it will saturate the powder itself, and then you will leave a fingerprint, and it'll be quite hard to shift it afterwards. So just be a bit careful with that. And then obviously if you're overcoating as well, if you're spraying over there, make sure they're nice light dusty coats, and that way you won't completely obliterate it. You will lose some of the pastel dust because by its nature it's going to sink in, but you won't lose that much. If you're doing it the wash way, as I said, use exactly the same way, you know, as you would use it. Just let it dry into a cup and then pop it straight in, and away you go. Apart from that, it's a lovely, lovely build. I would have preferred to have done the Hasegawa kit, to be honest, because I think it's a little bit more accurate and sort of gives it an overall better appearance to it, but certainly it really does look well, it looks the part, and it's been a pleasure to do.